Hey everybody, welcome to the Inventor Roundtable meeting tonight, February 13th. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. We are going to let Noah take over and talk to all of us about the different stages of prototyping, and then we'll be able to ask him some questions, because prototyping, as we are, learning, is a variety of stages from, the first duct tape and cardboard stage to then gathering information. I know Carol was at the show last year, gathered some information, and then kind of started over based on what we were able to find. We had inventors last year at ASD that had used Noah, and then they're off to the races and getting more stuff done. And so we'll have some of his prototypes and inventors there at the show, and it's really fun to see how things grow and get done. And so anyway, I want to introduce Noah McNeely with Product Quick Start. He is Bill's just logging in, so Noah did Bill's prototypes as well, and Jeff's prototypes. So everybody is checking in right now. So it's not just build a prototype and they will come. It is always a matter of stages of prototyping. Yes. And the further you get along in the steps, the more expensive they get, which is certainly true. But it's complicated. So it's not just a matter of the duct tape and cardboard version. It's a matter of the different phases of it as you go along. And I had a lady today that said, well, my prototype that I'm taking to the show is not the one that we can use for manufacturing. And it's like, nope, makes perfect sense. What you do off a 3D printer is not what you're going to do off of a mold and getting it out there. And so we're going to have Noah explain to us why there's a difference between, the duct tape and cardboard version that you do on your dining room table and what you use to manufacture. So Noah, introduce yourself to everybody and take it away.
Yeah, so I don't know if I can share my screen. They'll let me do that. Oh, there we go. Maybe. Is anything, can you guys see my screen?
I can't see anything, but let me see if I can pull you up and allow you to share screen.
Okay. Well, if we can't pull it off, it's not a big deal. I was just going to give a little background on who I am.
I'll work.
Okay, so if you do get to see the screen at some point, I was just pulling up my webpage to show you my company. It's called Product Quick Start. But I have been developing product for about 25 years. I like to describe myself sometimes as a recovering engineer. My first degree was engineering, and I'm actually on the advisory board of the mechanical engineering school down at Georgia Tech, where I studied. For graduate school, I also went to Georgia Tech, and I studied a field called industrial design, which some of you may know is the more artistic side of I'm just going to cancel the screen. We'll just forget that. It's more artistic, more human side of product development. So in that space, I look at, does it feel good to use? Does it look good? Is it something that people want to use? So I combine both the engineering and the design throughout my career, just to make this not be a 10-minute life story. Out of school, I started a different company with some other partners, and we did all sorts of development work, including prototyping for very big companies like Black & Decker and Arm & Hammer and Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola and Home Depot, and a lot of companies and brands you'd be familiar with are companies that I worked with and we developed products for, and went through the whole process: design, engineering, prototypes, and helping transition them into manufacturing. I grew that company with my partners to about 40 people. I ran it as the CEO for about 5 years. And then about 10 years ago, I reached what I like to call my midlife crisis, and realized I was tired of just managing 40 people. I wasn't doing any of the stuff I got into this business to do, like working with people like yourselves, and actually getting my hands dirty, building stuff, designing stuff, developing stuff. So we sold that company to some of the employees. They're still out there. We're still friends. We still refer business back and forth to each other. They still do their big company stuff. But along my journey, I realized I'm probably a lot like you guys in the sense that I'm very entrepreneurial. And that's how I came to where I am now. That's how I formed Product Quick Start, to do all the same stuff, but very streamlined for inventor entrepreneurs to help inventor entrepreneurs get across the finish line. Because I don't know how many of you have worked with design or development firms, but oftentimes they're really designed around meeting the needs of very big companies, and that's not really the right fit for most inventor entrepreneurs. They're not. Most of you, I'm sure, are bootstrapping what you're trying to do, and we have to be very sensitive to that. All right, so that's enough background. I'd be happy to answer any questions about my background if anyone has any. But about prototyping, so Rita brought up that there are multiple different types, multiple different layers of prototyping. And oftentimes when I meet inventors for the first time, I'm sure none of you guys were in this category, but they often don't understand what prototyping is for. People think of prototyping as just that fancy thing you show at the end to your investor or at the trade show or to whoever that's, it's perfect at that point. But in reality, prototyping is about learning things we don't know. And that starts, some of you probably started in your garage with duct tape and thumbtacks and paper clips, and you learn some things you didn't know without spending a lot of money. Then as we work through the process, we develop more and more sophisticated types of prototypes, because the things we need to learn as we get further on do relate more closely to how do we actually manufacture this? How do we actually manufacture it at the right cost? And how can I put this in someone's hands and see if it's a product they would actually want to use? So I think of it like a big funnel. At the beginning, there's a lot of stuff we don't know, and we want to learn as much of this as we can, spending almost no money. That's the stuff most of the time inventors do on their own. Then we come down a level. This stuff we know, is it big enough? Do the physics even work? Is it, is my idea even viable? Then we move down a level, and that's where we get into some more sophisticated prototyping, but still very accessible, very inexpensive types. And this might be 3D printing. It might be a combination of 3D printed parts and some of that duct tape work, again, to learn more things we don't know. Maybe at this point I need to learn, not does it work, but does it work in this shape? Does it work in this exact form that I couldn't do in duct tape, but now I can do in 3D printing? And then we keep working our way down. And at the end of the prototyping process, we reach what I like to call the factory prototype. And I call it that because often I work with a factory to produce that prototype in using methodologies that would very closely simulate what they would use in their production line. So, we can't always do that. Not everything can be simulated, but we can get very close in a lot of different areas. And at that point, we shouldn't be learning, does it work? We should be learning, do I put the button here? Do I put the button there? Is this the right color? Can it hold 300 pounds? Can it hold 200 pounds? Whatever those details are, we should be learning very specific details by the time we reach that point in the process. And that's often the prototype you would show at a show like Market Week, or you might show to your investors, or you'd use for crowdfunding, or any number of other things. But that's sort of the big picture. As Rita knows, I'm very conversational, so I would love to ask. I love you guys to ask questions, and I can talk about it further. Or Rita, if you ask questions, if you want me to answer more questions or go deeper on anything, I'm happy to do that as well.
Well, explain to everybody the difference between their proof of concept prototype and the manufacturer's prototype. Why is it so often that those have got to be changed?
Yeah, so occasionally they are the same thing, but proof of concept is really that does it work phase. By the time I'm engaging with a manufacturer, I need to know that it works, or need to have a really, really good idea that it works. So this proof of concept, maybe that's, again, something we build with 3D printing. We build with processes that are not necessarily like they would be in the final production. It might be much heavier, it might be much bigger, it might be the wrong color, it might be any number of things that I don't need to learn, because I know we can make it lighter, I know we can make it smaller, I know we can do this, I know we can do that. I don't need to prototype those things. I need to prototype well, if I move a blade this way, will it cut through a vine? If I do a blade this way, will it cut through a vine? I'm trying to learn those things. I'm trying to prove out my concept in whatever form I need to get past that unknown, to get past that hurdle. And then The factory prototype or the trade show prototype, that both simulates the actual concept, it simulates the function, but it also shows the final intended appearance, more or less, and the final intended production methodology. So if we're going to make it out of plastic molding, or make parts of it out of injection molding in the factory, we're going to make those parts not with 3D printing at that point, but with a process called vacuum casting, which for 99.9% of the people, you hand them a vacuum cast part, you hand them an injection molded part, they can't tell the difference. Someone like me who's done it for 25 years, I can tell the difference, but sometimes I have to dig a little bit before I can really realize the difference. So that's a process. Again, I wouldn't use in proof of concept typically because it's more expensive than 3D printing. I want to save that until I know as much as I can learn without doing that process.
All right. So when, all right. So the first prototype a lot of my guys make is, we always laugh and say duct tape and cardboard, but a lot of times it's from parts. You go out and I'm trying to make a new thing here. And so I go out and I buy a variety of pieces at Walmart, Home Depot, whatever, and put them together and say, oh, okay, this is what I can do, and then they'll hire somebody to do now the more polished version of the proof of concept. And a lot of times what we see then is that, all right, you want to make a shovel, Jeff, we're going to use you for an example. And
Jeff's product is way more than a shovel.
I know, but we're going to take it easy here. All right. And so, you've got a basic thing here that you've done with rapid prototype and pieces and everything that is now, it proves it works. All right. And that's what you had at the trade show a couple of years ago. It works. But manufacturing is different. And a lot of inventors, when they realize it's going to be, 10 grand just to get the, manufacturer's prototype. Why is it so expensive then to get, you're working at the next evolution of prototype, but it is expensive. And a lot of times it's like, I know with Bill's hammer, you went through stages of that. And a lot of inventors don't realize it's like, okay, it fits better if it does it this way. It needs to open top to bottom instead of left to right, and all of those are phases then you go through for getting the manufacturer's prototype ready to go.
Well, so first off, for most inventor products, it shouldn't cost 10 grand to do the factory prototype. Now, there are exceptions. Some are big. They use a lot of material. They use a really exotic process. Then it can be quite expensive. But, again, we try to avoid spending money we don't need to spend. And forgive my dog is walking by. She has very loud nails. Apologize for that. But we try not to spend money we don't need to spend because that's money you can use for marketing or going to the show or, doing whatever else you need to do. So part of what I try to do is help my clients find the most efficient way to get to where they're trying to go. And sometimes that means I have to really try to understand where they're trying to go. So a lot of times what we're doing is that communication. But as people that have worked with me on this call know, I'm a big fan of don't pay me to do something you don't need me to do. If it's something you can do, I'll give you advice. I'll help you, steer you on that path. Save the money you need to pay me or the factory for what you really can't do on your own. And that's a different spot for different people and different products. Sometimes it's from the very first prototype you need someone's help with if it's something very kind of scientific or whatever. Sometimes you can get almost all the way to the factory prototype on your own. You don't, if it's just a plastic widget, maybe you don't need me until the very end, and that's okay too. But I think I'm rambling. I lost your question in the ramble a little bit, but yeah, the reason it's expensive is because to simulate some of these processes, like injection molding, we use a process called vacuum casting, and that is a fairly expensive process. The way that works, as an example, is we will either machine, which is start with a big block of material and cut away what you don't want with a computer-controlled cutting device, a CNC mill, or we do create a really high-fidelity 3D print that becomes the master, and that goes into this big sort of box or tank or whatever, and around that we fill it with liquid silicone, which that then sets, and then you cut the master out, and you've got these two halves of silicone, and that's your mold. You put that back together, You mix up a special thing, which is really like epoxy, but super specific epoxy with all sorts of properties in it. And we use a vacuum to pull that into that mold. And then that has to set for sometimes 24 hours. And then someone has to manually take that mold off. And then you have your part. And then you use that mold again for 10 or 20 parts. But it's a very labor intensive process, which is why it's expensive. If we're making, Jeff's project, we needed to make a metal part recently that had to be machined. So the way that starts is we started with a block of aluminum. And then using the CAD data that we created, we have a machine, a CNC cutter that goes in and cuts away everything that we don't want. And then we end up with a piece of aluminum that's the exact shape we want. So and we can anodize that. We can do all sorts of different things with it. But that also takes a lot of time. That ties up that machine for a lot of time, which is why it's expensive to do that. Not to mention the fact we had to buy a block of aluminum this big to start with to end up with a part that big. So there are a lot of reasons they can be expensive.
So, all right. Does anybody have any questions? If you've got questions as we're going through this, I know when I'm a speaker at a meeting somewhere in America, I prefer it when all of you guys pitch in and help me by asking questions. So Scott got a question. Scott, how are you? Tell Noah, introduce yourself and tell him what you've got, and then ask your question.
Hi, Noah. We met last year. I've spent many hours listening to you. How's the lair?
The lair is a terrible mess at the moment because I have a lot of projects going on. But
I have my own lair.
Good.
I'm making, got patented for a heated body pillow.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. My first premise is to make this thing app driven so it can communicate with home thermostats and set them back when the bed gets to be warm. It'll save an awful lot of money for people, and it'll reduce pollution.
Sure.
We've got a lot of extra wind energy at night that they would like to use, and we're throwing it away.
Mm-hmm. And just to throw something at you, something from a thing I was involved with years and years ago, I could see applications for that for people that have Alzheimer's and other situations where that warmth is very important to them. It helps them cope with their situation. So anyway, different market.
Well, I've dug deep into sleep, and I found that aromatherapy is used all the time to help people sleep. So I am making an aromatherapy ball, and I'm putting it into the ear of my Snoodle pillow, because Snoodle kind of looks like a thing without making a stuffed animal for adults. It has a single ear.
Okay.
And in the single ear is going to smell nice. I'm hoping it'll be a psychological trigger for people to go to sleep. And I'm now going down the process of making these two spheres in a mold. And I'm getting most of my research done and my products made in China for obvious reason. I'm using Alibaba, and I'm having great success. I put in a request for mold factories and put in a request for this small product. I got quotes from about $9,500 down to $1,500. And I am shocked at how many mold factories there are that are just dying to make this stupid little ball for me.
Right.
So I've priced about 20 of them because they were so eager to take me through pricing. I had 3D samples made up, printed up by the companies that I'm getting close to finishing my negotiation with. My question is, why is there such a vast difference in mold prices?
Okay, so a couple things about that. One, you're doing something I generally recommend people not do. You might be one of the ones that succeeds with it, and that's just go straight to Alibaba. And the reason for that, and you're kind of seeing this in the variation of mold prices, is it's sort of a good, bad, and ugly, just like anything else on the internet. And you're a 12-hour plane flight away, so it's hard to know exactly what you're getting there, because you can put a website up that looks like anything. And in actuality, having been there myself, factories come in all different shapes and sizes. Some aren't even factories. Some are just a guy in a garage that knows a guy down the street that can steal some time at a factory to make your thing. So some are great big factories that they got 2,000 employees. Some very good factories have 6 employees. There's a different match for all sorts of different things. So what you're likely seeing in the price variations, a few things. 1, quality of the factory. 2, desperation level of the factory. So you might have found some factories that are just on their last leg, and that's not a healthy situation. You might get a good deal, but they may not be there to make it the second time around. So you have to be careful about that as well. In China, as you may know, there are some areas that are better at following international labor laws than others, and some of the ones that are giving very cheap quotes, I don't know, maybe are those that are less above board. So I'd be careful about that. So normally, the way I like to work, having done this for a long time, is I take my time to vet factories. I have some people in China I send around to check, hey, is this a legit place? And are they not? And I'll get all different reports
too.
What's that?
Alibaba has a system where they kind of vet and grade and score factories.
Right, the same way Amazon has a rating system for products, but you know how that can work. So just be careful. I mean, do what you want to do. I've met people that have succeeded that way. I've met a lot of people that have been really badly burned that way. So just be careful what you're doing. All the factories I work with, it took me a long time to get comfortable with them. And I've fired factories over the years in terms of I'm not working with you anymore. So just understand it's a little bit of a wild west.
Like if I select a factory to make the mold, should I say, hey, I have an agreement I'm going to ask you to sign?
Of course, but again,
not worth the paper it's written on.
If they're an unscrupulous group of people, then it's not. If they are a good group of people, then yeah, they'll honor the agreement. So that's just like anywhere else in the world. If you're dealing with someone that wants to screw you, I don't care if it's here in the US or somewhere over there, they're going to screw you. So it's just here you might be able to pursue legal action. There you're going to have more trouble.
I don't think they want negative reviews on Alibaba. That's not going to help them, succeed.
But again, if it's just the guy that knows the guy, they'll just change their name and start over. Now I've seen that happen before. So just do what you feel comfortable with. Just be careful. And if one thing I'd ask is if they could point you to another client that they've made product for that you could talk to, I think that would be the absolute best way to check their validity.
When you're looking for reviews, all right, you go to page 10 of the Google search, and then you find, what they're saying on page 10. Because, when you ask a company for their reviews, they're not going to give you the bad ones. They're going to give you the good ones. So you got to dig a little bit deeper when you're looking for reviews on a company. And so, you put in the name of the company and you ask for reviews, and then you go to page 10, and that's where you find the truth. And I've learned to check things out, certainly.
And now you can actually ask ChatGPT to do that for you. You can say, summarize the reviews for this company for me, and they'll, the AI will go through and kind of give you that, which is kind of interesting.
But like I said, if you ask them for, give me some referrals, they're not going to give you the bad ones. Right. They're going to give you the good ones.
That's true too, but at least that way you can know that they had a legit client at some point. That's at least, if they're like, I don't have anybody I'm going to send to you, then there's reasons sometimes they won't do that are legit, like it's confidential, this, that, or the other. But that's a caution flag for me generally. So someone in the chat had a question. I don't know who TLC Evergreen is.
Oh yeah. So guys, go ahead and throw your question out there. Jenny, you got a question?
I do, yes. Hi. I'm new to your group. This is my first call. But I just had a question for Noah. So I already have my product. I have 4 patents on it, and I have my actual product in hand. Does your company help with like round 2 of production, or do you just work with the prototyping piece?
Oh no, we do help with manufacturing coordination. So it would depend a little bit on what you mean by round 2. Have you already, you've already received an order from a factory, or you're ready to?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I have my inventory. I was just curious about if you did production like in the US, or because one of the things I've been into previously was the cost to get it here from China after it was produced. So, and my inventory was a couple of years ago. So I imagine it's a lot more expensive now. So I was just curious about that part once the prototype and once
so
inventory is
I do get. Yeah, I do get involved in that from time to time. It's not every project that I do that with, but usually I get involved in that when someone has had a bad experience with their first factory and they're like, these guys won't return my calls, whatever, I'm ready to move on. Unfortunately, at that point, if you've already made a mold or whatever, it can be very difficult to get that back. Now, as far as making stuff in the US, yeah, there's some stuff that we can do here cost competitively. It's considerably more challenging for certain types of products to do that, just because very commoditized products, especially for startups, if you're ordering 500,000 of something, you're a big enough client for a domestic company to do some automation and to be really interested in it. But oftentimes startups are going in and I want to make 1,000 of these. That's a real tough thing to do in the US. It can be done, but it's not so easy. But it would depend on the individual situation. If you want to contact me, I'd be happy to look at it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so the question from Lori and Ted, which is the TLC Evergreen, was if their prototype is currently using a product that can be bought off the shelf, all right, how does that impact then their ability to move on to, what they're doing? And Ted and Lori, unmute yourselves and ask the question so that I can do you can do a better job of asking your question than I can. But anyway, so yeah. And that is not all that unusual, is that people go out and buy pieces off the shelf and put together their prototype, but it's not necessarily what would be considered the manufacturer's prototype. Correct, Noah?
Well, it depends. I mean, if the item is what you would call kind of a ubiquitous common part type item. Let's say, for example, I'm working on a program right now that it's going to a vacuum bottle is part of the product, but that's like an ancillary part of the product. So we're just using a generic one for now for that prototype. And to the question there, we did scrape off the we repainted it so you can't tell what brand it is. It was a very generic brand anyway, so it's not very identifiable. So that is something we can do in those cases. If it's something that's very, very specific, like if I look at it and I know, oh, that's a Coke bottle, that's a little bit more difficult, because then you're kind of in trademark violation area. But as far as a prototype, in terms of demonstrating something, if you're not going to show it publicly, you do whatever you want. If you are showing it like at a trade show or whatever, I would try to make that element as generic as possible. When it does get to production, the way I normally handle those things is I will work, whoever the primary factory ends up being, especially if they're in Asia, we will find other factories that make that bottle or make whatever. We will have the primary factory reach out to them. This is one place we do use Alibaba. So we'll find multiple factories that make bottles like that or whatever it is. And then we'll have the primary factory reach out, make sure they're legit. And then that primary factory takes on the responsibility of sourcing that component or that pre-made product from the secondary factory, brings it in, and it gets assembled into the full product. So, but yeah, I don't, so long as it's not something that is clearly, by shape or whatever, a Mickey Mouse watch or something, I think you're totally fine to do that.
Well, sometimes it depends on where that company is in the stages of their patent. So if the patent coverage, like with the Coke bottle, okay, that coverage is come and gone by decades. So,
well, the trademark on the Coke bottle is not.
No, the trademark is not. They own that forever. But the shape of the bottle. So when you've got, a bottle that is a particular shape, that's come and gone. But let's say that you've got something out there and the patent on that product has expired. Anybody and everybody can use it. All right. Mm-hmm. If it's still covered by the patent, no, you can't use it. So you might be able to buy one off the shelf, use it for your prototype and say, okay, Mr. Prototype guy, and for manufacturing, we need to change this enough so I'm not infringing. But giving your prototype guy a heads up on.
But if it's a generic enough product, then it's probably not a patent issue. Again, like a vacuum bottle, they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. An earphone or something that's ubiquitous and everywhere. You shouldn't have an issue for your prototype doing that. Now, you may not be able to source that exact one. You'd have to find, or we'd have to find, or whoever you work with would have to find an equivalent for you when you get to manufacturing. But yeah, I would stay away from anything that's very technology specific to whatever company. But in your question, I think you said it's generic. It can be any company. I think that would be fine.
Yeah, you pretty much answered our question. Thank you very much. We're still interested in licensing our product versus producing it. So any help we can get, from the other end is what we're really needing as far as advice goes. So thank you. That helps.
Well, I'm glad you guys are here tonight. I mean, like I said earlier, is that, we had things that Noah had done as far as the prototype goes. I always go to the word, the sexy prototype, but the proof of concept prototype. I've been told that, the sexy prototype is no longer politically correct. And it's like, oh, come on, everybody gets that.
Well, sometimes it's hard to call a prototype for a portable urinal sexy, but sometimes I work on some pretty strange things. So
okay, you got me there. We had prototypes there last year at the ASD Market Week, and the inventors, the folks who went, it was amazing what they learned, the questions they were asked, and they ended up coming back and then saying, oh, let's do this with the prototype. Let's go ahead and file this. Let's make these changes. So that was a critical stage for them to do a better job before they ended up going then to manufacturing. And we had one lady that was there with her prototype. She had 2 to her name and came back and went ahead and filed some different intellectual property. And she was off to the races. And people were asking, it's like, no, I don't want a case of these. I want a pallet of these delivered. And so she went into manufacturing, and it was the coolest product. But not only that, but it broadened her scope then on where she would sell these. Because, when you go to a show like that, it's like, all right, it's this niche. But what she found out being at the bigger show was that it wasn't just this niche for her product. It was like this niche for her product. And so it opened all kinds of doors for her product. And she was thrilled. So since a show a year ago now, she's had manufacturing done and has had her first order shipped to her. And she's got stores all over the US that are ordering, these by the trailer load. So it was really cool to watch that, because we didn't have that at some of the other shows that we've gone to. But ASD Market Week was a great show for those early stage inventors to go and get feedback.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Who else has got a question for Noah? Carol, is that you getting ready to ask a question?
Yeah.
All right, throw it out there. Oh, you just muted yourself. There
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So as you know, my prototype had some issues at the show,
Yes.
and I've been trying to work to see the best way to go to repair the piece of it that I feel wasn't secure. And I didn't realize that, unfortunately, until the show. So now my question is, it's difficult to find a company that's just going to do a small piece that needs to be secured or reinforced. And so is that something that your company would look into and evaluate maybe, and just see if
Sure.
maybe
I mean,
they need more than that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it's something that's just super gluing, you can probably find someone local to do it. But it depends on what it is. I mean, what can you tell me about? I mean, is it a piece of metal, a piece of plastic?
Well, it's something. It's the device that attaches to a chair that allows it's an air reader, I call it, and it's basically a device that allows people to read at eye level without having to strain the neck. It's ergonomic for the neck and shoulder. And so it attaches to the arm of a chair, but the piece that attaches to the arm of the chair is not secure because it's attached to a, what do you call it? It's the wire, gooseneck wire.
Okay.
It's attached to gooseneck wire, and that's heavy, and it tilts over. And so I need something stronger on that little piece on the chair. So
yeah, no, we could look at that. I would look at that. And, so 2 things there. 1, I'd want to figure out why it broke, and you may know that already. And 2, I'd want to come up with a solution to replace or repair the part that broke so that it won't break again. I mean,
Mhm.
to be honest with you, prototypes generally are more delicate than the real thing. So, there's only so much we can do. So anything, any prototype's going to break if you're hard enough with it.
Well, it
but-
was put piecemeal together. I had it done at a university who helped me with it. And
Mhm.
so a lot of this was, off the shelf products put together. And so to keep the costs down,
Mhm.
because I had 2 other prototypes that didn't work out either. So I was trying to keep the cost down. But anyhow, with all of the experience you have, I think I would be interested in seeing what you think where I should go with this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think to start, send me some pictures or videos. of it
Yes,
that you
I
can.
can do that.
You can, show me what's wrong with it, and I'll see what I can
Okay,
come up
that
with.
sounds like a good deal. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Scott?
No, you're a prototype builder, but how much of your time do you spend with international sourcing? And do you mind disclosing to us what sources you use to find your international contacts?
Well,
Alibaba being one of them. That's the one I've been using, but I know there's a few others out there.
so I find my international contacts. Well, there's 2 levels of your question. One, I work on the whole product development process. So, sourcing is one piece of that. Prototyping is one piece of that. Design, development, engineering, that's a piece of that. So I don't know that I can break it down into one. I spend 8% of my time here, because even here we have to think about this part. Otherwise, if we do this without thinking about this, it's not going to be right. So it's a little bit more nebulous than 10% here, 10% there. I find sources in different ways. Sometimes through referrals. Sometimes I've met other people in my trade, and they're like, I use this factory over here. You should talk to them, and I'll call them up, and sometimes they're, oh, they're right. You guys are great. Sometimes I'm like, you guys aren't that great. That's one way. I actually have found people through LinkedIn, the ones that especially if I'm looking for producing something that's a little bit kind of oddball out of the mainstream. I sometimes will use LinkedIn to get that started. I'll meet several people there, the ones that do the right answers to the right questions and ask me the right questions. Those are the ones that bubble to the top, and then over time I evaluate them and see if they're worth moving forward with. I get bombarded with Chinese companies that because they know the field I'm in, and everyone in the field that I'm in, we just get bombarded with people contacting us constantly. So those almost just become noise at this point, because they all say the same things when they're outreach. So I try to get to the people that aren't necessarily the outbound salespeople of those companies, because salespeople, you just don't know what's true and what's not. So I try to go through some back channels like LinkedIn and other things. I do have a partner's not really the right word, because we don't own part of each other's companies, but I have an associate that I work with quite a bit who is an American expat. He lives in Hong Kong, raised his family there. He's got beautiful young kids there, lived there for 15 or so years. He and his team, they do sourcing audits all throughout Southeast Asia. So not just China, they do Vietnam and Indonesia. And we actually had to develop a product a couple of years ago that required it to be made out of natural latex, which this was a learning curve issue for me. Natural latex comes out of the trees. It starts to set up immediately. So the factories that can make it are generally near where the forests are. So we had to actually source that part from Malaysia. So he went down there and found us a few factories that could do it, and audited, and we selected one. So there are a lot of different ways. I don't have a bullet answer to the question.
Have you read the book Poorly Made in China?
No.
You must. It's
okay.
Awesome.
Well, China's like anywhere else. You can get crap, or you can get Rolex quality there. It's just who you hire and how much you're willing to pay. I mean, China certainly 30 years ago had a huge quality problem. Now there are certain things there that in certain industries they're among the highest quality in the world. So it just sort of depends on the situation.
The lead in the toy incident is mentioned in the book, Poorly Made in China.
Sure, but
you books about sourcing over there.
Yeah, but the waterfront of Cleveland was on fire for 15 years here. So every place has problems. It's how you fix and respond to that. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of things change. How has the new administration with the tariffs that are pending, how does that affect, an inventor in the early stages? What should they be looking out for, Noah?
Well, that's a question I do get. There's a lot of nervousness about tariffs. So the way I look at that is this. I mean, tariffs are going to be what they're going to be. They're going to affect everybody the same, more or less. People will say, oh, I want to move everything to the US, and that's great. I'm a big fan of that if we can do it. The problem is for startups, again, you're making 5,000 something, 2,000 something. Even if tariffs go to 100%, the honest truth is it's going to still be cheaper most of the time to make it over there, especially if there's any assembly at all in your product, because that's what eats you up on cost domestically or in more developed countries. If it's just a plastic widget, one part, that's a different story. That we can probably, it'll still be more in the US, but it won't be that much more typically. So people have asked me, well, what happens if we end up in a trade war and there's no trade with China? Well, then I'm going to have a factory in the US that'll make all my stuff for me. Well, here's what'll happen day 2 of that problem is all the companies that are big and have way more money than you do, they're going to call your factory in Iowa or Indiana or whatever, and they're either going to buy the factory or they're going to give them so much money that your project gets pushed to the side. So it's an unfortunate situation, I think, for most startups that would be in that space. Now, again, once you're big, once you grow and you're a big client for, a big enough client to be something that moves the needle for a U.S. Domestic manufacturer, then you might look at reshoring back to the U.S. or starting in the U.S. if you have that kind of cloud or whatever it is. But it's really tough for young startups to do that for basic products. And you say, well, what about Brazil? What about Vietnam? What about wherever? Those are all great too. The issue, which I think Scott kind of alluded to, you throw a rock in China, you're going to hit a factory. China has, 1.2 billion people. A lot of them work in manufacturing. Vietnam has 80 million people, 100 million people. I don't know what it is. There's just not near as much capacity in other places. India may come along in a few years for certain types of products. Yes, they're a good choice now, but nothing that's kind of precision or high tech for the most part, especially for startups. Again, you're a big company. Yeah, there's really big factories that you can work with, but again, startups is a whole different ballgame. Sorry, I rambled once again. I'm bad at that.
Well, I attended a meeting last week that was for it was a gentleman from Canada that was presenting, and he was talking about how in 2025 we've kind of hit critical mass where, manufacturing, and with the tariffs going on internationally, it's actually going to be cheaper to, or at least equal to, in North America. So even though Canada, US, and Mexico are having a little bit of tug of war, most of that manufacturing will come back to North America, if it's not just America, but North America. And so we should start seeing a pretty good shift in a lot of that. And we just have to wait and see what's going to happen. I know that one of our guys, he will be at ASD with his product, and he was just 2 or 3 months ago all worried about the tariffs and everything. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so the tariffs got slapped on him, and it was 50 cents more. And he goes, oh geez, that's not that big of a deal, 50 cents. So you deal with it. We all deal with it.
So if I could wave a magic wand and make myself emperor for the day, or the administration's manufacturing czar or whatever, what I would love to see our country do is 2 things. One, create zones of manufacturing that really focuses on small companies that can grow into big companies. So build zones out like a manufacturing zone where you can have 2 or 3 molding companies, 2 or 3 metal companies, whatever, that can go in and they can profitably do small projects and build that infrastructure. That's an infrastructure we just don't have here the way they do in China. Right. Again, big supply stuff, we got that infrastructure. The problem is there's not a lot of money in that kind of infrastructure, and they even with tariffs, there's still never going to be. So that's one thing I would try to find a way to do that. The next thing, I would look at I would try to recreate I would try to help other countries that maybe we're friendlier with recreate what China has done. So I'd look at Central America. I'd look at Argentina. I'd look at Chile. I'd look at places that still have a lower labor cost than here, higher than China for the most part. I'd look at East Africa. I actually have a company in Kenya I do some work with occasionally. It's very oddball. They do some electronic stuff for me, which I know sounds weird, in Kenya, but they're actually very good. There are pockets here, there, and about that could be developed if someone put some attention to it. But I'm not in politics. That's that's me preaching. That's me on my soapbox.
Well, and that's one of the other reasons why we look a lot of times at licensing, because a company, if you had a plumbing product, we would go to a company like Danco. All right, Danco already owns all the shelf space at Home Depot and Lowe's for plumbing products.
And
So-
Danco has the clout to go into a manufacturer and say, you're making this.
Yeah, exactly. And so, different licensees have got, different strengths. And so, you as an independent inventor ordering, 5,000 units at a time, as opposed to a Danco that's ordering 50,000 at a time, you've got some different leverage.
Well, even the Danco example, again, if they wanted to do a test market somewhere, because they're ordering 50,000s and 100,000s of other things, they can go to that factory and say, you're making 5,000 of these for us. And that's just the way it is. They have that kind of power that you and I don't have.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, anybody else have some questions?
So Jenny asked, what the companies consider as big orders, and I responded in the text, but just to give a little more information on that, it depends. It's not so much how many of the product you're making; it's really the value of the thing. So, if you're making a product that's a 10-cent product, they're going to want you to make 1 million of those to be, or actually probably tens of millions of those to be considered, quote, a big client, because there's just not that much value, 10 cents a piece. If you're making a much more expensive product, maybe it's a $500 product. It's this big complicated piece of really high style, high material equipment. Big might be making 1,000 of those. Big might be making 2,000 of those. So it's really more about the total value of the project. Every manufacturer is going to look at that differently. And I think you're asking the question about what do manufacturers consider big for doing the project here in the U.S. So it's there's not a single answer to that, but generally it's going to relate to the total value of the project.
Okay, Jeff?
Yeah, I would be remiss in not recognizing Noah, because he's helping me with my product, and he's just great to work with. So we've got some awesome ideas in terms of how to do it, and I needed to take what we called a garage prototype into something that could be manufacturable and make it a little bit more streamlined. And I don't know if sexy is the right word for it, but anyway, so yeah, he's been really helpful. So, and my thanks go out to him. He's been awesome. So,
well, Jeff, thanks for saying that. It's been a pleasure to work with you as well.
All right, guys. I am going to be sending out to everyone through one of our outlets a link to a petition we need signed. It's from U.S. Inventor. It is about the way they're petitioning the USPTO to protect the patents of the little independent inventor. So, you sign it, you can forward that link to all your relatives, have them sign it. They don't have to be an inventor to sign it, but we really need to then petition Congress to go ahead and protect the rights of the independent inventor. I was on a meeting last night with them. It's U.S. Inventor. Randy Landrenow is the president. U.S. Inventor all started years ago. It was right before the pandemic with Josh Malone. He's the gentleman that did Bunch of Balloons. And I was buying Bunch of Balloons for my grandsons before I ever knew the inventor of Bunch of Balloons. He had 8 kids. And by the time he got done filling the balloons, they'd all gone in for dinner and he was out there all wet. Figured there's got to be a better way. So he invented Bunch of Balloons. He was infringed on by, he had licensed it to a company in New Zealand, and then was infringed on by Telebrands, and the toy company went after them. And it took 5 years. It cost the toy company $20 million. They won $50 million in the lawsuit. And Josh packed up his family, moved to DC, and started U.S. Inventor to help petition and protect all of the independent inventors' rights through the USPTO. So when I send that out to you, just don't throw it off, because they're protecting your rights as an inventor and your, the patent protection process. So sign it, everybody sign it, and I will be getting that out to you probably in the next 48 hours.
Rita, what's the what is there a deadline on that? Is there a particular calendar event that we're trying to get those in by?
They have been ongoing since 2019. So, there's always something that's involved with that, but I will start sending out, we've had them on the radio, but they just sent me the link this morning.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll send that to my network as well. I'll be happy to.
Yep. So anybody, else out there that you can send it off to, you'll get it through some of my emails. All right. Any other questions, guys? Howard, you raised your hand. All right, Howard, I see you've got your hand up. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? I can see you waving at me, Howard. I cannot hear you. All right. Turn your phone off, whatever. Log out, log back in. We'll see if we can't get you in. Other than that, call me and I will ask Noah the question on the phone. So we'll see if Howard can get back in and join us. He doesn't look like he's muted on the screen, but we can't. I can't hear him.
Rita, how do we get on your email list to get that email?
If you're not part of the meetup or how did you find out about the meeting, Jenny?
Carol Sprunk from My Product Today.
Oh yeah.
I missed your call when you joined the My Product Today live. I wasn't able to join that live, so she's posted some of your stuff, and so that's how I found this. I think I got on one of your meetups for the one I'm in Nashville, so I think you had something set up around in Tennessee. I'm not really sure. I've done a lot of things and I can't remember everything I did. So
that's okay. Shoot me over an email and that'll put you on my email list. All right. Use Rita at inventorlady.com.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
And that's, anybody who's, wants to get, let me see if that's Howard. So anybody that wants to, that is not on my email list, go ahead and send it to me. All right. Noah, your rates and your contact information, shoot that out there.
I'm sorry, say that again. My dog was barking.
Rates and contact information. Can you, you know what, everybody who's here, I've got Noah's phone number and contact information. I will shoot that out to you tomorrow.
Yeah, or just go to the website, productquickstart.com. I put that in the chat, and
Okay.
There's some, you can do the contact us form there. There's also the phone number. Rates, every product, I don't have a fixed fee for, well, let me rephrase that. I don't have a fixed dollar amount that every project is. I have to look at each one individually because there's a big difference between doing a paperclip and doing a chainsaw. So when I do talk with a client, I'll do my best to understand everything they're trying to do, and then I'll create a scope of work, and it has a fixed fee. I don't work hourly like a plumber who says it's going to be $100 and all of a sudden it's $800. I do everything fixed fee so you don't have surprises as much as I can. Now I can't tell you how much manufacturing is going to cost on day one when all I've seen is a sketch, but I try to keep that as surprise free as possible.
So, and Sean just asked me if we would post that on Facebook. We will post that link where you can go in and sign that petition anywhere, if you've heard about us, except for, Jenny hearing about us through Carol, we will ship that out. Now we will ship it to Carol so she can share it with her group. But we'll put it out on Facebook. We'll put it out on the YouTube. We'll put it out everywhere we can in the next 48 hours, just because it's important that we, support our own rights and our own protection. So, and like I said, when you get it, grab the link, All right, and send that out to your own network so that, you know, we get as many people signing that as possible, because it doesn't matter if they've got a patent filed, you know, it doesn't matter if they're building something, it doesn't, you know, I don't know, it might matter that they're 18 and over, but, you know, I'm going to have my mother sign it and she's 90. All right, guys. I don't want to keep Noah tied up any longer than necessary. If you've got any questions out there, let us know. But he posted his email address in the chat box, so you can grab it and then send him your questions and ask anything you need to. If you are, you know, out there and you're still thinking about going to ASD with us, come along. I know that Jeff's going to be there, and Bill Holly's going to be there, and you know, this is the place to go and show off and get feedback, and, you know, bring your prototypes and bring inventory. Last year, the folks that went with us, they were just crazy excited with how much was going on, and the orders and the interest in their products and the feedback that they got, and the next stages. So it's not too late to join us, and we're looking forward to it. So quick, raise your hand, smile at us if you've got another question. Otherwise, we're going to let everybody go, and thanks for joining us. Howard, you got another question? All right, you better text it to me.
Looks like John R. has a question as well.
All right.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear you, John.
Hey, so when you're developing a prototype, how would you like maybe test it for durability? Say that it's, you know, something that's going to be used in the field or something like that. How do you test it for strength and durability to make sure that it holds up?
So to make sure the prototype holds up, or to make sure that the ultimate manufactured product will hold up, or both?
Yeah, I guess that both.
So
Right when you started, you said something that weighs, you know, can support 200 pounds or 300 pounds. How do you engineer that? How do you know that it's going to support 300 instead of 200?
well, you know, there's engineering calculations we can do. I try to avoid those when I can. There's simulations we can do, but to be honest, I'm a big fan of experimentation. So if, let's say it's this thing that has to support 300 pounds, it's an arm that hangs off something, I'll build a crude one first and test it and find out, oh, it breaks at 200 pounds or it breaks at 500 pounds. And then I can move forward from there. That's often faster and cheaper than trying to do some sort of complex simulation. Again, depending on what it is. So there's different problems have to be approached in different ways. At the end of the day, some things cannot be fully prototyped in prototyping level materials and processes like 3D printing or whatever. Those types where we do have to go to the actual manufacturing process to really test it out, then we have to be very, very careful about doing these calculations. First, we want to make sure that everything's double checked 2-3 times. There is software we can run it through that does what's called a finite element analysis, which basically is a really fancy word for saying it calculates how it's going to perform under certain loads. So there are a variety of different things we can do. If it gets into really sophisticated analysis, then there are some specialty companies that I can work with to get that done. Like if, you know, thermal flow or mass flow or all sorts of nerdy engineering stuff that your eyes would glaze over talking about.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we had, you know, different folks that were going to, you know, the show last year, and they knew that their prototype was not going to be as strong as that the final product would be, but it certainly got the proof of concept out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they went after the manufacturing, they had to up it to be what everybody would expect it to be used in that setting. And I think, you know, George with the dog leash, you know, his original prototypes would not, you know, take, you know, a dog pulling somebody down a hill. But, you know, when he goes through and knows that he's, you know, licensed it, and that company will choose what to make it out of, and then the proper weight.
In some cases, we almost do the reverse, where for prototypes, if you're going to try to demonstrate the functionality, we know that certain prototyping materials and processes just are not as strong as manufactured processes. So we'll actually overbuild those prototypes. Again, if the weight of the prototype is not what's important, it's really the strength. We may make it thicker. We may do lots of things then thicker, but bigger, whatever than we know the manufactured product will be. Then when we get to the manufacturing stage, we optimize that down for cost and weight and things. So it just sort of, again, it depends on what we're trying to demonstrate with the prototype.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, guys, if you've got any other questions, anything else comes up, you got my number, you got my email address, reach out. I will be at my desk until I leave for ASD Market Week in 3 weeks. So anyway, you'll be able to find me and get me. I'll talk to all of you later. Noah, thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
you
no,
were
it's great.
wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
enjoyed it, guys.
Talk
Thank you.
later.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello?